It's not uncommon these days for an artist to pass away and for either the label or the family to release music posthumously. It's been around in hip-hop for years, but has ramped up more recently in the streaming era, especially among mainstream rappers. Sometimes it could be done right, but most of the time these projects leave a stain on the artist's legacy. Rich Homie Quan passed away in September. A week after his death, his label released a new song. A week. It's gotten so bad these days that artists like Anderson .Paak have gotten tattoos, physical ink printed on their skin to specifically say not to release any posthumous music after their death because it was not supposed to be released at all. It's become a massive problem in the record industry, and it becomes more of a moral and ethical question at the end of the day because most of these albums are released with zero creative control from these artists. What if you didn't want these songs to come out? Well, too bad. Every single demo you've recorded, every single verse you've laid out is now out there to squeeze every single last dollar out of your name. Just look at an artist like Tupac. Pac has released some of the greatest albums in the entire genre during his lifetime, and while technically the Don Illuminati theory was released after his death, it came out 40 days after and technically was finished by the time he passed away, so I don't really count it. So if we don't count Machiavelli, Pac worked on 5 albums during his lifetime, with all of them seeing a release. A whopping 6 albums have come out after his death. That's right, 6, with the last one releasing in 2006, 10 years after his death. To put that into perspective, that's like if a new XXXTentacion album came out in 2027. And sure, some of these albums do have some gems on them. Do for Love, Thug's Mansion, and Letter to My Unborn Child are fantastic songs, but these albums are trash. And not only are these albums trash, they get worse and worse as time goes on. Take Loyal to the Game, for example, which was executively produced by Eminem. Mr. Slim Shady decided it would be a great idea to manipulate Pac's vocals to fit the 2000s style of hip-hop, when these songs were recorded in the 90s and they weren't intended to be used like that. These projects leave a massive stain on Tupac's discography, and Death Row Records should be ashamed that these even came out. But the problem is, they won't be, because 5 of these 6 albums gained platinum status, and that's where the problem lies. As long as there is a demand, record labels will have zero problem pumping out these projects no matter how little quality is actually put into them. Biggie was also a victim of this cycle, but not nearly as bad as Pac was. New York's Finest had 2 albums released posthumously, which I've never seen anyone talk about. Ready to Die and Life After Death are certified classics and are still discussed in today's hip-hop circles. But have you ever heard of these 2 albums, let alone even played them? Sure, these 2 albums might have been hits back in the day, but maybe 10, 20 years into the future, they're not really discussed at all. They're not talked about, and that's where the problem lies in, because they're more of a stain on the artist's legacy now that all this time has passed. Nobody really revisits these projects. Now I have 3 modern examples I want to talk about how posthumous albums can be done right and wrong. Juice WRLD and Pop Smoke are both great examples of how to do a posthumous album right. Their albums Legends Never Die and Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon, they're both great albums, and although both of them weren't really complete by the time of the artist's passing, you can tell that both time and effort were put into these releases, and that there was purpose behind these albums. Both these projects have mega hits and are genuinely well received by the public. Their predecessors, however, are not. Fighting Demons is one of the most mediocre albums I've ever heard. It's just the definition of mid. It feels like a bunch of songs plastered together and released. It's mid. And The Party Never Ends is supposed to release this November. I hope it's good, but this is starting to hit the trend of Tupac. Once this album releases, Juice will have more solo albums released after his death than alive. Faith by Pop Smoke, on the other hand, is utter garbage. You can tell that the label put every single last verse Pop Smoke ever recorded onto this album, slapped a bunch of features together, and put it out to the general public. I mean, just look at how many features are on this album, and would you look at that? They drained every single Pop Smoke song he had left because there is no more unreleased music in the vault at all. That's it. It's gone. There's no more. And honestly, that might be a good thing, because these labels can stop putting pop's reputation in the garbage. And finally, we have Bad Vibes Forever by XXXTentacion, which it feels like an X album in name only, and I'll explain. What I mean by that is this project feels like a bunch of demos and random tracks compiled together under production that might not have been even meant for these songs, with a bunch of random features that likely weren't even supposed to be on these songs, and released. It just feels like an X album in name only. Just look at some of these features. Do they make sense? Do they really make sense? No. It also doesn't help that this album is pure garbage. Future me here, while I was editing this video, I thought to myself, I'm bashing these albums a lot, and rightfully so, but I thought I should give another example of a great posthumous album, because they do exist. One of the reasons why these albums can be so good is that they can actually introduce the artist to a completely new generation of music listeners. For example, The Big Picture was my first introduction to Big L, and it's one of my favorite albums. The project is just another example of fantastic rapping from the 90s, and the storytelling is just out of this world. Just look at a song like The Heist or The Heist Revisited, a masterpiece in storytelling. Some of the bars have not aged the best, but it's still a great album, and I would recommend this project to anyone who listens to hip hop. So although I generally have a negative opinion to these types of albums, there are exceptions to the rule. Am I saying we need to get rid of posthumous albums altogether? No, I am not in favor of just getting rid of them. When done right, they can be fantastic projects that actually keep the legacy of the artist alive, but a lot of the time these projects feel like the artist has no creative control behind them because they didn't. And the cycle is not going to stop anytime soon as long as these albums generate gold and platinum records. And if you managed to get this far, I just want to say thank you for taking your time out of your day to watch this. It's greatly appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter using the link in the description below. I'm pretty active on there. And as always, I'll see you on the flip side.